Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Welcome to our streamcast this week, which
welcome.
which totally is already going off without any hitches.
Yep,
Just
as just the
just
top
great.
quality stuff you come to expect from the Star Wars Refuge.
Yep. So I hope you're all doing good out there today. We're streaming on a Friday today, which is uh,
Unusual.
it is. It's a little different for us, but it's all good. I don't know
Well,
why.
we're streaming on a different day because usually we stream yesterday, and I was actually not around yesterday. I was hanging out with one of my best friends and her three kids, and her oldest is 4, and I was showing them Star Wars: The Clone Wars for the first time. So that's what I was doing instead, and that was pretty darn fun. He was super into it. It's kind of funny. The most intense thing he'd been watching before was like Paw Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
So he went from like Paw Patrol to the Clone Wars. He's just sitting there like, what's gonna happen? And he's like hiding under a blanket, and he was watching like Ahsoka fight Grievous, and he's like, is the lady gonna be okay? It was just really cute.
That's adorable.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, she sent me a video yesterday, and I guess they were looking at like some of the cover art for the
Yeah.
DVDs, and he
Yep.
was like, "Is this person nice?" It was
He needed to know ahead of time who was nice, who
it
was
was
not nice.
was absolutely adorable, um, and adorable is what we do here at Port
Yep.
Haven. Um, but we are here today, a day later, but just as excited to be here with you
Yep.
today on our streamcast. And today, what we want to talk about. So if you haven't been following along yet, uh, not a fan of Paw Patrol there.
I'm trying to save his parents from Paw Patrol is effectively what my goal was.
This is a complete aside, but I used to watch a lot of Minecraft streams because I'm an adult,
Hmm.
um, and one of my favorite Minecraft gamers on YouTube installed a Paw Patrol mod so that he could play with his kids. And then a couple weeks after that, his channel went away. So I don't know what what happened to him, but I don't. I guess people weren't digging Paw Patrol
Paw
Minecraft.
Patrol.
But this is not our Paw Patrol stream. We'll do that
No.
next week.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
but if you haven't noticed, well, I guess it's a little too late to notice now. But YB has been streaming Knights of the Old Republic
Yep.
every week for the last several weeks. Made it all the way through the game.
Yep. I think it
Uh,
took us 11 streams, and most of those were 3 hours.
yeah, and that was her very first dark side playthrough
Yes,
of a
it was.
KotOR game.
If you
Um,
want to watch a complete mental breakdown of a lightsider playing Dark Side, and you either have played the game or don't mind it being spoiled for you, our second to last stream, which is it's called the Final Star Map or something like that. I have it time stamped in the comments where I just like cry on stream because I'm killing Jolie Bindo.
yeah, my favorite part about that is because like you knew all along that it was
Yep.
coming.
Yep.
But like I think you like as much as you know the game, you like momentarily forgot that is the place where it would happen.
It would happen. Well, I kept thinking of the Ebon Hawk because I knew there was the confrontation at the Ebon Hawk, and
Hmm.
somehow in my brain, which made no sense, it happened at the Ebon Hawk. So I was like, "This is gonna be fine." But I have a bad habit of that with Star Wars in general.
Yeah.
Like I remember the day they announced that J.J. Abrams was going to direct The Force Awakens. We didn't know it was called
Right.
The Force Awakens at the time, but we knew when he was going to direct Episode 7. When I got over the rush of my favorite director directing a Star Wars movie, and I started thinking about it, I was like, Han's probably going to die in Episode 7 because J.J. Abrams knows Star Wars well enough to know that you have to kill a mentor in the
Right.
first movie, but Luke's too obvious, and he's also a big enough fan to know that Harrison Ford has tried to like die in every Star Wars movie he's ever been in. So like it's just like the most J.J. Abrams thing to do to kill Han Solo in
Right.
Episode 7, and I knew that before the script was written, before anything was shot. I just knew Han was going to die, and then I was in theaters, and as soon as the crawl happened, I forgot
Hmm.
everything that existed. and I was just experiencing the movie. And then you get to the bit where Han is walking out on the bridge and he yells, Ben! And like, I got all excited to find out his real name was Ben, and then my heart sank, and I went, Han's gonna die, Han's gonna die, Han's gonna die. And all the mental preparation I had done for a year and a half, or however long it was, 2 years, I was like, oh gosh, and I just wasn't ready anymore.
Yeah.
Even though I just knew. So it was like that moment all over again, where I knew, but then in the heat of it all, I'm like,
Yeah.
That was kind of off topic. I'm sorry, but
no,
that was.
I can dig it. But so Jess finished her KotOR stream, so we thought what we would do today is do, I guess, maybe a retrospective of sorts.
Yeah.
If you want to think about it, more or less just a conversation about Knights of the Old Republic as a sort of franchise within a franchise.
Yes, exactly.
Talk about both of the games, KotOR and KotOR 2. And neither of us has played the Old Republic, but if you have Old Republic stuff in general, whether it's the MMO or some of the novels, Jess has read the novels. I've not read those novels, but not yet anyway. But if there are anything Old Republic related that you would like us to talk about today, this is kind of what we're on to.
And two quick things. One, Leon, I'm sorry that you got bit by a dog. And two, I'd like to say hello to the Negotiator, who just popped up in chat. Negotiator also runs a Star Wars channel.
Oh, cool.
And is also, he's the mind behind the Positive Star Wars YouTubers on Twitter.
Oh, very much appreciated there.
Very much appreciate that too. So he deserves a nice round of applause in chat. And it's very cool to see you here. So thank you for dropping by. Everyone should check out his channel as well.
Yep. And Voltix, Jess is a big Jurassic fan as well. At least until recently.
Until recently. Yeah, no, I'm a big dino nut, though, for sure.
But so, just as a way of getting us started with the game, I know I have a lot of thoughts about KotOR 2. And I think we want to kind of head that way. But tell me, just in general, what you thought about the dark side playthrough of the first game.
So I'm glad now to say that I've done it. Being such a fan of the game, there was half of the game in a lot of ways that I never experienced. So now I can say that I've done it. I do have to say, I just feel like there's so much less story in a dark side playthrough. And maybe I just wasn't playing the dark side correctly, and you can still get all of that story. But, when I play at light side, so much of the light side involves talking, getting to know the world, getting to know the characters, and like convincing them to do things of their own free will. And to do that, you get to know the backstory of what was going on and why. And even with the Sand People part to me is so fascinating when you actually get to talk to them. And if you are willing to give up your Crate Dragon Pearl, or what I usually did was save the game, give them my Crate Dragon Pearl, see what happens, and then load the old file. You can get the whole oral history of the Sand People and how that ties in with the Jawas, and if you kind of know what's going on, especially if you've beaten the game before, how the Rakuten Empire came in and what Tatooine used to be like and how they basically spawned both the species. And that stuff's just so fascinating to me. And that was really what I loved about KotOR, was it was this myth within a myth, and that there was this whole other thing that the movies never even touched. When you play it in Darkside, it's just, I don't know, I just didn't get that same sense of what was going on. And I found different things fulfilling, like redeeming different dark side characters to the light side and stuff like that. But there's a lot of stuff in the dark side that I think if KotOR, the first game, has any weakness, especially for a game of its time, it's that its morality system is way too binary. Way too binary. So there were things on a dark side playthrough that I enjoyed getting to do without it taking away from what I was trying to do. Not having to pay a docking fee and then like Bastille yells at you or something, which at some level I guess makes sense. But what if I'm on Kashyyyk and I don't want to give Zerka slavers $300 to dock there? Like, why is that inherently this like misuse of my Jedi powers to do that?
Right.
And so it was kind of it in a way it was freeing to play dark side, and I just had a lot of fun because the characters in the game I hated, I
Mm-hmm.
liked getting snappy with, like Karth and Jahani and all of
Right.
that. I just feel like, oh, I can finally deal with you the way I've always wanted to deal with you.
Yeah.
But overall, I say it was a good experience. I'm not sure I'll play it dark side again,
Yeah.
but I'm glad I did it. Is what I would say.
I will say so. A couple of things. I know we've talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on stream before on the channel,
Mm-hmm.
but my very first KotOR game, I kind of just played it like where I did what I thought I would do, and
Yeah.
it ended up this very kind of gray playthrough because you're right. The game doesn't have a whole lot of nuance in its kind of morality sort of options that it gives you. And so, I ended up with this really gray character, and the game is really not built to be played that way.
No, it is
Because
not.
you
You are
end up,
punished
yeah,
if you're gray.
yeah, you end up basically with a build who's like inept because you can't use any of the force powers because, if you use a force power that's out of your alignment, it like draws from the force a lot, and so basically everything ends up being terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And the game is just very hard to play that way. Um, but I will say, in terms of like the amount of lore and story,
Mm-hmm.
I think you might be right. I don't guess I really realized how comparatively less story there was in KotOR
Mm-hmm.
for a dark side playthrough. I will say, I don't think that's the case for KotOR 2.
I can
Um,
see that.
Especially
I can.
because KotOR 2 is about the Sith anyway. Um, that I feel like there's more content there. Even though the light side playthrough is canon for both, or was canon rather,
Mm-hmm.
for
Right.
both games, I feel like KotOR 2 did more with the dark side character, especially with the exile being involved with Malachor and the war
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. Like just that history being already there, and you
Mm-hmm.
knowing that history for the most part. There wasn't a big story reveal.
Right.
In KotOR 2, like you didn't learn that you were the Dark Lord of the Sith. I mean, you really weren't a
Right.
Sith all along, but the dark side playthrough was a little more interesting. Well, and the whole KotOR 2 is a more nuanced game
It
anyway.
is. Well,
But
I think KOTOR 2 in many ways is a look at the dark side
yeah,
far more than it is a look at the light anyway.
I think so.
And there's a lot of conversations with Kreia. The advantage with KOTOR 2 is you get so many more light and dark side points. Like in that game, I
Mm-hmm.
would take darks because I've only ever played KOTOR 2 light as well. But when talking to characters and trying to gain influence with characters, I have said dark side things,
Right,
but it's fine because there's enough light side things in the game where I can like get the light side points back.
right,
But if you don't say certain dark side things, you can't finish like go to story, HK's story,
mm-hmm.
Kreia's story. Like there's so many points where you can't complete. There's like if you're a completionist like me, KOTOR
Right,
2 is a nightmare because you can't complete it one side or another, but you still get that punishment of being gray. I think that the first
yeah,
game has, unless you just have like a really high charisma score. I mean, you can at least compensate for it in KOTOR 2,
right,
but it's not as bad. But in a lot of ways, KOTOR 2 is a commentary on how binary the Jedi and Sith were in one, both as a mechanic but also just as an in-universe philosophy.
right. Well, and I think KotOR 2, it still penalizes you for playing gray, but
Mm-hmm.
it rewards you in a way with the influence stuff because
Yes.
the closer the more influence you have over the characters, the more they work with your character in
Mm-hmm.
game mechanic-y kind of ways too. And so I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's a little more balanced, but I think you're right. You still get plenty of the opportunities to to make up both the dark side or the light side depending on what kind of build you're
Right.
doing. Voltix the command doesn't really work right. Um, by the way. uh, because Nightbot is still wanting to do the commands, and I can't figure out how to make Nightbot not do that. But anyway, um,
Yeah.
but
So
yeah,
yeah. I think we're both trying to say. Go ahead.
but yeah. So I think I prefer KotOR 2 as
Hmm.
a game. Um,
Yeah.
I think there is a more interesting story in KotOR 2, but I think it's
Hmm.
a better story in KotOR 1 just because
Yes.
of the reveal. Um, and
Oh, for sure. Especially because like the reveal in KOTOR 2, if there is one, is Kreia. And if you couldn't tell Kreia was bad news from the beginning of the game, I don't know what to tell you.
yeah.
Like,
Well, I don't think they go out of their way to to make Kreia. I mean, because she's dead when you meet her.
right.
Like it's it's pretty obvious. I mean, and we see her pretty early on, even before you get off of is it Paragus, I guess,
Yeah.
in
Yes.
KotOR 2. You know, she has that
Purgatory,
interaction.
more like it.
Yeah. She has that interaction with Darth Sion where he cuts off her hand, and it's
Yep.
obvious that they know each other. So like, the
Yeah.
game hides it from the exile, but it doesn't hide it from you.
Which is
Um,
an interesting thing about KOTOR in general,
yeah.
too, in general. There's a lot of things that are hidden from the exile that are not hidden from you, the player,
Right.
which is very interesting to me in a role playing game. Because in
Right.
KOTOR 1, everything is hidden from you as the player. Like you have no clue. Like even the like obviously this is going to be full of spoilers on the first two games, but even the like the little montage right when you figure out you're Revan and it's showing you like all the little lines that are throughout the game.
Hmm.
Those are so subtle and so easy to go over your head in a 40-hour game.
Right. Yeah.
But then when you see them next to each other, you're like, oh, oh. Because like when I was playing KOTOR 1 for the first time, I was in high school. And the game had actually been out for a while by the time I got it. But I didn't know anything about it before I played it, other than that it was good. And I remember thinking I was going to end up that I remember thinking there was going to be a twist, like, but I didn't think that it was going to be that I was Revan. I thought the twist was going to be I used to be a dark Jedi. Like
Yeah.
I had at least picked up on that much. Like, okay, I used to be a dark Jedi in Revan's army or something, and that's going to be this whole thing. But then when I found out I was actually Revan, I was floored. Like I remember going to school and being like depressed for 2 weeks
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm Darth Revan. Like it fundamentally affected me as a human being.
That's
That
funny.
twist. Yeah.
I don't think I had quite that reaction, but it was still pretty profound because it's it's something looking back. You know, it's one of those things like a movie that you've seen before,
Right.
like when you see The Sixth Sense the second time, like you can
Hmm.
see
Right.
all the
All the
clues
clues.
that were there,
Yeah.
but I can't really think of a game either before KOTOR where you ended up being the antagonist and didn't know it.
Right.
Um,
I mean, there's games that have pretty big twists. One, I won't say what it is because I'm planning on streaming this for you to watch. But there's a pretty sizable twist in Bioshock.
yeah.
That's not that you're actually the villain, but it's still pretty like out there. Um, but you know, um, I think it's something where after KOTOR, more and more games kind of started to steal stuff, so it's
Mhm.
not as revolutionary. And it's kind of a thing. Like I feel like if you're a gamer today and you've played a lot of games, and you go back to KOTOR, it's probably not going to be as mind blowing
Right.
as playing it in the time.
Well, and in general, one of the things that I really enjoyed about KOTOR and KOTOR 2 or just the Old Republic era in general is that I felt like it allowed us to do a lot of kind of exploring within the Star Wars universe, but in a way that was safe compared to like the films and like canon. So like a lot of things, like even like Darth Bane and the kind of stuff that comes out of that,
Right.
was incredibly influential over Legends and current canon.
Mm-hmm.
But like it was a way to do new things in Star Wars, but that was still safe and it was
Right.
still compartmentalized in a way. I mean, and technically, that's still the only part of Legends canon that's still ongoing
Right.
because
Is Tor.
the fact that it's compartmentalized like that allows it to be the same but separate.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that I've always liked about the era in general. But
Mm-hmm.
I know it's something you really enjoy too. So what is it about, like just the older, like is it just because I know you're big into Revan? So
Right.
is Revan the thing that makes the Old Republic cool for you, or is there something else about it?
Revan is a big part of it, and I think a lot of that is. Actually, I had a friend give me a hard time about this once because I was saying how much I enjoy Revan, and I think that's part of why I enjoy Kylo Ren's character so much because their
Yeah.
armor looks the same. And he was picking on me because basically the idea is Revan is whoever you want Revan to be, and in a lot of ways Revan is you. So he was like, "You just like Revan because he's you," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, but no, I think so much of the Old Republic that I love because I also love the Old Republic comic, the Knights of the Old Republic comics. There's
Right.
Tor tie-in comics that are also good, but the Knights of the Old Republic comics about Zane Cadwick, I think is his name, are phenomenal. But what I like about it is I'm such a Jedi file. Like
Right.
Jedi are my favorite characters. I think they're so fun to watch. I think the things they do are so cool. And the Old Republic is thousands of Jedi versus thousands of Sith.
Right.
And that it's just, to me, it's Force users at their finest.
Right.
Just watch even if you haven't played the Old Republic, if you watch the Old Republic cinematic trailers, like the Deceived cinematic trailer where the Sith attack the Jedi Temple, like that, I don't know how you can be a Star Wars fan and not have that just send adrenaline through your veins to just watch Sith storming the Jedi Temple and like this massive 200-way lightsaber fight. And that's really what the Old Republic does for me.
I mean, because really, even if you look at like the Jedi Order at the time of the prequels, I feel like it is smaller is maybe not the right word because there's still a lot of Jedi, but it is less expansive, or at least it feels less expansive to me than it did in the Old Republic because like the stakes were so much higher. I feel like in the Old Republic because you had not just two Sith or two Sith in hiding or maybe no Sith, but like these large competing orders that are not just competing like in terms of like combat and military stuff but like the fate of the galaxy, but that represent competing ideas about the Force, like and I think that's really compelling to me. Fat Batman asked a question about Darth Nihilus, and I know you have thoughts about Darth Nihilus, but he says, where does Darth Nihilus factor into everything? He knows he's an Old Republic character, but he's not sure exactly where he is, but he just looks cool.
Yeah. I mean, Darth Nihilus he's the red herring big bad in KotOR 2, I guess is the best way to explain it. So he is a villain in KotOR 2. KotOR 2 has the Sith Triumvirate, which is Nihilus, Sion, and Darth Treyas. And you think Nihilus is going to be the big bad, and you actually end up fighting him, and in theory, defeating him. What, 2/3 of the way through the game?
Yeah,
maybe even half.
Yeah,
like it's pretty early on, especially depending on like where you are with side quests and stuff, relatively. And then it ends up being this other character that you deal with, who's actually the big bad. But hey, Rye VH Obi-Wan Kenobi, is it Rye there? You just subscribed. We didn't get the pop-up thing. There's usually a pop-up thing, but thank you for subscribing, and hello. It is good to see you here. Welcome to our. This is kind of like our live podcast show, so it's nice to see you. Also, we had Nolan and McYagi slip in, so hello to you guys as well, as long as we're saying our hellos. But so Nihilus, talking about Nihilus brings up a point I wanted to get to today, which is KotOR 2, to me, is an absolutely fascinating discussion point
Mm-hmm.
for the Force, for the dark side, and all of that stuff. I just would have liked it a lot more if some of the discussion points in KotOR 2
Yeah.
would have not been canon at the time,
Right.
right? Like the concept of Nihilus is really cool, but kind of problematic to what we understood the Force to be, at least in Legends, and I think to some extent in the new canon. But he's cool to discuss that idea. So Nihilus is a dark side, is a Sith who consumes the Force. Like he goes to whole planets and sucks them of their Force energy and leaves them dry and devoid of the Force, and then moves on, which is a fascinating concept. At some level, I kind of have an issue with it because in Empire, Yoda talks about how the Force flows through everything, and it flows even between the rock and the ship, so inanimate objects. And I just kind of have a problem seeing the Force as this finite thing that can be fully removed from anything, especially if it resides within animate objects. But I mean, at the same time, there's other stuff like Vornskers and just Salamari, or however you would pronounce them, that always, at some level I don't think should work either, and I still like them. So, and then there's the whole long discussion. So,
I mean, for me, I guess, and this may not be the correct way, but I guess I read Nihilus a little bit different. It's not so much feeding on the Force, but using the Force to feed off of life.
Okay.
And so it wasn't so much that he was draining things of the Force, but that he was using the Force to drain things of life, and that hunger, and I like it because it is nihilistic in a way. This idea that everything has to die, or it's just meaningless or pointless in a way. But because the more he feeds, the more he needs to feed. And so it is this kind of not really cyclical kind of thing, but like exponentially growing kind of thing. This unsatiable.
Like what's that thing in Fantastic Four? Like the I don't know the comics well, but like the second of the original movies, like with the Silver Surfer.
I never watched it, so I can't.
Oh, okay.
I can't tell you.
Not a lot of people did, which is why they didn't make more. To be fair,
Chris Evans is better as Captain America.
I'm certainly not going to argue that, but I remember being really mad they casted Chris Evans because I was like, he's already someone else, and then I'm like, never mind, he's perfect, it's fine. But anyway, the second one, there's the Silver Surfer is like a herald for some other villain that just eats planets. It was kind of similar.
Yeah.
I just shook my whole camera. Sorry, guys.
But I like, again, these kind of discussion points about the Force in KotOR 2. Not so, like, I feel like the Sith Triumvirate are each three different sort of discussion points about the Force. Because Nihilus is all about, consuming with the Force and using the dark side to kind of try to meet a need that cannot be satisfied, which I feel like is the point of like a lot of Star Wars critiques of the Sith. Like they're trying to use the dark side to get more power, but more power is never going to be enough. Like there's not enough.
Right.
So it's like this interesting, like extreme version of what Star Wars assumes the dark side is most of the time anyway. It's this thirst for power personified in Nihilus. And if you look at Scion like is death. He is literal. Well, I guess literally. I don't know how you like, but he's dead, and he's literally being held together by his own hatred. So that at the end, when you finally, if you play it light side, you finally sort of get him to give in. He just kind of goes away because it was his hatred is literally holding himself together.
Right.
And then Treya, or Kreia and Treyas. I always want to say Treya, like put the two together. But Kreia or Darth Treyas, like she is just so hurt by the idea of the Force that she wants the Force to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, I love all of those kind of points, and they work together in ways that I don't know I like being canon either, but I think it's just so,
Right.
like, it's just so
It's
interesting to me, and
interesting.
it
It's
so
really
informs,
interesting.
like, the way I understand the dark side is so informed by KotOR 2,
Right.
um, that
And
I
I
feel
mean,
like that's
exactly
why
what
I
you're
like it
saying
better.
is, yeah. I mean, just the opposite of
Hmm.
Nihilus wants death through the Force. Treya wants death of the Force, and then in a way, Scion is. I feel like the 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 Jedi file that I am, where I try
Hmm.
really hard not to look down on the lessers known as the Sith.
Yeah.
But the way I kind of see it is you have Nihilus is kind of like what every Sith thinks they are in a
Hmm.
way, and Treya is this kind of new way the Sith could be, and then Scion is what every Sith actually is, which is somebody who's just really hurt and went crying to the dark side about it,
Right.
and thinks they're super awesome, and thinks that they have a lot of control, and really they're just someone's pawn. Like
Right.
Scion is barely even a Sith Lord. I like him better that Knox is going to be really mad about what I just said. That's fine. I thought I was safe because he wasn't here, but he probably caught me. He probably caught me. That's fine.
Yeah.
Um, but Scion, I mean, he's not as pathetic as like Bandon or anything. Like I like Scion's character a lot,
Right.
but he's very like he needs the exile, or he needs Treya, or he needs someone to
Right.
tell him what to do with all of his power, because he's
Right.
just real mad about it all the time. And I think Maul goes through something like that in the Clone Wars,
Right.
where he is that I'm mad about it, but I need a master
Hmm.
type. And then when Palpatine leaves him for dead,
Right.
and then Savage finds him, it's about Maul
Right.
having that. And by the way, yes, I think Fat Batman, it's Galactus. I think that is who I was thinking of.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar. I didn't know that was in the film, but that sounds right. But the interesting thing to me about Kreia, and I think this gets kind of at the point there that Knox was making too.
Yeah.
I feel like Kreia hates that the Force has a will. Like, I think
Yes.
she feels trapped by the Force.
Mm-hmm.
And so from her point of view, especially because the rest of the Sith betrayed her, because
Mm-hmm.
of course they did. Um,
Right. Right. Yeah.
but I feel like she wants the life that the exile has. Like, she wants to live a life without the Force, but she's
Mm-hmm.
unable to live a life without the Force. And so her way of doing that is by just like destroying the Force altogether. And I think that's so interesting to me too. And maybe it's something that only like a betrayed fallen Sith, because she wasn't really I mean, I guess she was a Jedi at one point, but she's not like a fallen Jedi, but she's like, she failed at being a Sith is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a position that only somebody that has failed at being a Sith could be in, because from our perspective as viewers of Star Wars and readers and lovers of Star Wars, we live our lives wanting to know what the Force is like, and Kreia is coming from the perspective of, oh well, I know what the Force is like and I don't want it anymore. Like, I think that's an interesting kind of point to be at too.
Right. Knox is saying, to be fair, the Jedi are just as deluded, if not more, than the Sith in the game. I'm assuming we're still talking about two. They end up deceived by Kreia and trapped in their own hubris. Oh, the Jedi are like really off in two, especially.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think that's an interesting thing to talk about. I think if KotOR 2 is a discussion on the dark side, I think KotOR 1 is a discussion on the light side, just albeit maybe not as pointed. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think, other than the twist in the game, KotOR 1 is fairly safe in what it has to say about the Force.
Right.
But it is a sign of the problems of the Jedi, and
Mm-hmm.
problems that the Jedi would continue to face until the prequel trilogy. Again, talking about I don't like to say Legends isn't canon. Legends is its own canon.
Right.
In the same way the Marvel and DC universe have different universes. Legends is just a different Star Wars universe. So within the canon of the Legends universe, the Jedi would go on and still have these same problems, which is what they did to Revan is so counter to the light side. Right. I mean, yeah, killing Revan. Anytime a Jedi has to kill someone, it's always kind of hard to determine how light side or dark side that is, which gets into a lot of my arguments about the light side and the dark side, which I've gone over many times before. But where you can at least make an argument that killing Revan would stop the death of any number of people, it is absolutely dark side to keep someone alive and rewrite their identity against their will to use them to track down someone else. Like, that was so not a proper Jedi thing to do. Right. And they did it anyway. And it just kind of like how the Jedi Council interacts with everybody else and that sort of thing. Real quick, Obi-Wan in chat, we have both played KotOR 1 and 2 several times, and this discussion is prompted because I just finished streaming KotOR 1 on this channel. So if you are interested in seeing how some of that went, you can find that in a playlist elsewhere on here. But we just wrapped that up. We will soon start another game here. But
And one of the things I really like about KotOR 2 is I feel like it is so much not just about the Sith or the Force, but it's all about like consequences also. And I feel like KotOR 1, we don't really get the consequences of the choices that the Jedi or the Sith or Revan or whoever makes on sort of a large scale, because like I feel like KotOR 2 asked the question more than KotOR 1 did about whether or not the Jedi were right or wrong in what they did to Revan.
Right.
Because the exile is such a part of that, because the exile went to war with Revan, and then you end up learning it wasn't the Jedi that shut the exile off from the Force, but rather the exile that did it herself. But but so like just the consequences of using the Force in a war, or is it right or wrong to go to war and be violent in defense of other people? Right. So like, were the Jedi right? Were they wrong? Was Revan right or wrong? In a way that has nothing to do with was Revan a Sith, because Revan was a Jedi at the time that Revan went to war. Like, and he fell to the dark side as a consequence of what happened. But like, that's such an interesting thing to me too, because what happened to the exile was not about Revan becoming a Sith. It was about the exile joining Revan and Revan's going to war. Like, Revan left the Jedi Order, I guess you could say, or at least he disobeyed the Jedi Order. And so like all the stuff about Malachor and the battles, and and when you talk to Mandalore in KotOR 2, or when you talk to what's his name, Atton, and the way that Atton fought in the war, like you get all these like real, like in a real world consequences to war, but in a Star Wars context, in a way that's not like explicitly political, or that you can say, oh, this is about ongoing stuff in the world today. But I really like that sort of notion that things have consequences that are larger than yourself too, because I feel like Kreia acknowledges that, but she doesn't like it, because as much as she wants to force the exile to come to terms with, and I'm saying her because the canon understanding is that the exile was a woman.
It was her,
that Kreia wants to force the exile to come to terms with the consequences of her own actions, but Kreia wants to kill the Force so that she doesn't have to deal with the consequences of what she has done. And it's just, I feel like KotOR 2 is so undersold because it does some weird things with the Force, and it's undersold because it has a crappy ending. But there's so much there,
Well, and it's undersold because the story is great, but it's disjointed because it was rushed. Like it's not the writers of the game's fault. It was just they were not given enough time to make the game, which is largely fixed if you can get the restoration mod. Because I've played it with the restoration mod and I don't have quite as many of the same issues. Nox, real quick. Technically, Revan always had the choice to turn against Bastila and the Jedi by making dark side choices in the game. He still retained his will. I agree with that completely, that they didn't overwrite his will. I just think they wanted to.
Yeah.
So in the same way, like, you can get arrested for attempted murder. It's not like, okay, just because you didn't succeed in killing someone.
Right.
Like, what the Jedi were doing is still very counter to what Jedi would do, even if it wasn't successful, I guess is what I'm saying there.
Right. And it reminds me, too, of, this is a new canon novel, which was based on some Clone Wars episodes that didn't get produced.
Yes.
But if you read the Dark Disciple novel, this is different than what the Jedi did to Revan. You know, they didn't erase Asajj Ventress's mind, but they were comfortable with Asajj doing things that went against their own precepts for the kind of practicality of it. Like, this novel's been out a while, so hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler. It's a really good novel, especially if you like Asajj Ventress or Quinlan Vos. And I'm pretty sure we get more Star Wars steamy scenes in that book too, if I remember correctly. Not as explicit as Lost Stars.
Not as explicit. No. There have been very few books that have been as explicit as Lost.
But it's interesting to me too, because the Jedi send Asajj Ventress to murder Count Dooku. Like, they're sending her on an assassination mission, which strikes me as similar to what they did with Revan, because I think Nox is right. Like, I think they were willing to take the risk that Revan would do dark side things because they wanted to get at Malak. So they thought, I guess from their perspective, they had handled Revan once, and so they weren't really so much concerned about Revan as much as they were using him to accomplish another purpose, which either does or doesn't work out for them depending on your perspective and the way you play the game. Nox also says, I thought Kreia was taking the Sith mantra apart and trying to get to its reward, the Force shall set me free. She realized the Force was the chains and wanted freedom. In my opinion, she embodied the Sith. I mean, I guess you can say that in a way, but I don't think, like, to the extent
I think she wanted the Force to die.
Yeah, like, I think you're right in that she wanted the freedom and she realized the Force is the chains. So I kind of see the argument that you're making, but I don't think any other Sith would agree that she is the embodiment of the Sith, because I think the Sith kind of relied as much as the Jedi do on the Force being existent.
Also, to Obi-Wan in the chat, do you guys know anything about Revan's mask? That was talked about in the Knights of the Old Republic comics, which are amazing comics. Again, I can't say it enough. I keep wanting to buy them, but I don't know that they've been republished under Disney, so it's like all the old Dark Horse copies, which are collector's items now, so they're expensive. But eventually I'm going to own them all. I should have thought of this years ago and bought them then, but that's okay. But we find out Revan, his mask is actually a Mandalorian mask, if I'm not mistaken. He finds, they were on a battlefield, and he finds like a blown apart helmet. So it's not like a full helmet, but he found like the faceplate of a Mandalorian mask and like turned that into it, which I think is kind of cool. Yeah. I like the idea that he is wearing the face of his enemy. Actually, that's pretty Sithy right there. Is to literally walk around wearing the face of your fallen foe.
Right.
It's also very Roman, I feel like.
Yeah, I can see that. But I just feel like there's just so much to. I mean, even just having played the game, so I've never played KotOR. I've never read any of the novels or the comics as much as I want to get into that some. I just feel like there's just so much there.
It really is like a second fandom in a lot of ways.
I mean, which is one of the reasons why I never want an Old Republic film or an Old Republic TV series, because I feel like that makes it real in a way. I feel like nothing is ever going to be a direct adaptation of that, and so I feel
Right.
like it's its own playground. Like it's good because it's a playground and you could do what you want in it, but
Hmm.
I feel like making a film of it takes some of that away.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I've long held like is I am such a Tor fan. I never want it adapted because it'll never be right. In the same way, I'm like at this point, I don't want
hmm
Mara Jade in the new canon because she won't be Mara Jade. I
Right,
would rather just not have her.
right. Old Republic soap opera. Yeah, I get into that. Bastila would star in that 100% because
But
Bastila and Karth are just soap opera characters.
so opera. Oh my gosh. Darth Revan's robes. Do I know anything about Revan's robes? I don't know if there is a special story to his robes specifically. There might be, but I'm not familiar if there's a specific one. Other than like I said, I mean, his mask is the biggest deal. But I mean, I'm sure he designed his robes in a certain way.
Right.
I think the full Sith robes he only got when he became a Sith. I think he still wore darker clothes as a Jedi, and he still wore the mask as a Jedi.
hmm
But I don't think he adopted the full iconic robes until he was Sith. I could be making that up.
Yeah.
Um, I did like a point you made earlier about how like KotOR 2 felt political without being like right now political.
hmm
And I think that's kind of an important thing to talk about because that's a big conversation on Star Wars Twitter right now. Is like,
Right.
is Star Wars meant to be political or not? And I kind of go back to a line from Jolie in the first game, and that's Karth is talking to Jolie like, Jolie, how can you not be a part of this war? How can you not be like fighting? Like Malik is the worst
Right.
thing ever. And Jolie's like, yeah, he's the worst thing ever, except for Exar Kun before him, and except for the guy before him. He's like, there's always going to be a worst guy ever. You shouldn't be so. I can't remember the exact line. We didn't get to it in my playthrough because I don't think I took Karth and Jolie out together very much. But it's something to the effect of, don't be so caught up in yourself that you think you are in the most important part of history.
Right.
And I think with Star Wars, I completely agree that Star Wars has always been political. I
hmm
completely disagree that Star Wars is about current events.
Right.
And this is something I might get into in a vlog one of these days. But I remember I saw a guy by the name of Ken Burns speak. He's one of the top documentarians in the U.S. And somebody made a comment. It was a Q&A, and
hmm
somebody asked a question about like how do you make, how he finds like documentaries about the Civil War to have all these corollaries to current events in the modern day, and like
Right.
does he choose to do that? And Ken Burns was effectively like, I don't choose to do that. I don't want to make stuff about current events because we don't know how things are going to fall out.
Right.
But things in my documentaries affect current events because history repeats itself.
Right.
So I think in Star Wars, you find things that are political that affect our politics now because history repeats itself. So like KotOR 2 is very, very, very political, but I don't think it's making a commentary specifically on the
hmm
state of the world when it was released, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well, and I feel like, I teach political science and political philosophy, but I don't teach current events. Like I
Right.
feel like that's part of the reason why I like it because it is ideological without being partisan. It is
Mm-hmm.
political without being current. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
philosophical in a large way. Even going all the way back to like Empire, or even just to A New Hope. There are philosophical and political underpinnings about good and evil and things like that. And I feel like one of the things we get out of KotOR, and again specifically KotOR 2, is as much as, and maybe it's ironic given that the game forces you into choosing this binary, but I feel like one of the things we learn from KotOR is that you can't be that extreme because the Jedi were both right and wrong. Revan was both right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Kreia, even in being a Sith and being, evil in that sense, is both right and wrong.
And yep.
And I feel like that's something we don't really get a lot of in Star Wars. because Star Wars in its simplest, especially the original trilogy, which everybody holds up as being ideal, is this very simplified morality play. It is thematic. It is dark and light in every sense of that, and it's cut and dry, and there's not a lot of room for nuance. And I appreciate when we can take that powerful, simplistic, easy to understand way of looking at the world and make it nuanced.
Right.
But I also like discussions about masks and lightsabers too. So that's cool.
Let's see, Revan's lightsaber was the weapon. Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff to Revan because he's a guy who kind of completely changed his look. Although it's ironic because we really don't know what his look was beforehand, but yet it's such a big deal. Fat Batman says, that's what I want, political, but not about current events. Exactly. And I think, the obvious thing a lot of people talk about is there's a lot of stuff in the prequel trilogy, including lines of dialogue that you can say are about the W. Bush administration.
Yeah.
But I think, while that's absolutely true, Lucas's politics are not hidden in any way.
Sure.
There's a difference because in 50 years, somebody can watch Revenge of the Sith and hear lines of dialogue, and they're not going to go, well, I don't understand this because I don't remember what presidential administration was happening at the time this movie came out. The stuff that's happening is still going to make sense. Right. Where I was actually talking about it earlier in the chat, the Bauer in my name comes from Jack Bauer from a show called 24, and it's a show I'm still obsessed with. And I remember when it was out, I could get a lot of people into the show, but since time has gone on, I try to show it to people, and I have less and less success of people wanting to watch the show as they watch it. And I've come to realize that the show was such a product of its time. To get caught up in what the show, because the show is super political and it's super current events political. And when you're out of that, I can watch it and enjoy it because I remember the current events because I watched the show. And I'm right. I remember when I watched this episode and this was a thing and this is why that was a big deal.
Right.
But if you're to watch it in 2018, you're not going to know why a point was a big deal. So that's a show where, unfortunately, as much as I love it, and as much as I think it's a show that fundamentally changed television, I don't think it's a show that's going to have a longevity to it. But Star Wars, even where Lucas makes direct corollaries to current events at the time, you can still watch it. You don't need to know what the current events were to get why, if you're not with me, then you're my enemy, is an important line.
My problem with 24 was that Jack Bauer's wife and daughter got kidnapped and rescued 6 times in the span of a day.
I'm not going to say that I didn't have a problem with that, because I hated his wife. And Kim is the worst. She is the worst television character ever created. In the 6th season, she is standing in line behind someone, and she thinks someone is stalking her. And then she hides out with this couple. And I remember looking to my mother, who was watching the show with me, and I went, the person she thinks is stalking her is going to end up being normal. And the person she's sitting with to protect herself will be bad, because that's what Kim Bauer does. And that's exactly what happened. 100% exactly what happened. Anyway, that's super off topic, but I don't blame you for that one, because they were terrible.
If it was like a 15 episode season instead of a 24 episode, I would be into it. But anyway. Any other thoughts? We're coming up on our hour.
Coming up on time, yeah.
So, again, we can talk about more of this on other weeks too, because we obviously have a lot of thoughts, and it's hard to get to everything that's relevant or important in the span of an hour. Fat Batman's on board with Jack Bauer's family.
Oh yeah. Well, you also didn't like his wife because her name is Terry.
Oh yeah. Well, if you don't like his wife, just wait a little bit, and that'll be
be fine.
That won't be a problem for you after a while. That's a really dark spoiler. But
I mean, it's from 2001.
Anyway,
I think it's okay to spoil it. I mean, with KotOR, I feel like I don't know that I have anything else to say that's not going to lead us into like another hour's worth of discussion.
Right.
So I think I'm at a good point to pause.
Well, I will say too, one of the things I want to do in the next couple of months is I want to read some of the Old Republic novels that I've not read before. So,
and I will read them with you for sure.
That can be a way for us to continue this conversation later on when we have sort of a different context to bring us into the same type of conversation.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up today, one thing I wanted to mention is all of this today, we're talking about KotOR today because Yoda Bauer wrapped up her streams of Knights of the Old Republic, and starting, I think Tuesday, unless things go wrong, we have another game stream planned. It won't last as long because it's a lot shorter game. Yeah, Fat Batman, this is exactly what I'm talking about right now. So starting Tuesday, unless life things happen,
right?
I'm gonna start streaming for the next couple of weeks the game Star Wars Republic Commando. It also came out in 2005, I think, so right around the time of KotOR. So right,
KotOR, yeah.
But it was on sale on Steam right now, so I bought it, and it's a game I've wanted to play, and we've done some tests of it, and I think it's going to work for us to try to stream that. So we're at least going to give it a go, starting this week and for the next couple of weeks, and then we've got kind of a schedule. Not that it's a secret, but kind of a schedule worked out of some things we might do after that. But that's what we're going to do starting next week. Is playing Republic Commando. I will also say I've not looked into this yet, but I noticed when I bought it on Steam that it has some multiplayer support. So if you have Republic Commando on Steam, or if you want to buy it, like I said, it's like $3 on Steam right now, or $4.
Yeah.
With their summer sale through I guess next week.
Through the 5th of July.
Yeah, so next Thursday. If it's possible to do some multiplayer stuff with it, we might even do some of that on a stream. But yeah, Nolan is apparently a big fan of Commando. I've never played it before, so this will be a first time kind of thing for me. I've played the first level a couple of times as I was
stream testing.
Yes, testing it out. So I know the first 5 minutes of it really, really well at this point because I've played about an hour's worth of the first 5 minutes of the game. But we're gonna start doing that next week, and that was that's our plan going forward.
And I will say, there won't really, unless Django wants to do something on his own, there's not going to be a streamcast next week. I'm taking a brief YouTube vacation. I will probably be in Django's ear on his stream, but I'm gonna kind of chill for a little while just to get the bug back for doing this stuff. But after that, we'll be back to our regular kind of live podcast like this. So,
but yeah, that's kind of what you can expect. I've got some other things I'm going to do next week while YB is taking a break. Got some more Funko stuff that I've got planned, and some other things. So we're not taking a channel hiatus, but it'll be a little different for the next week. But so that's what we'll be doing coming up, and then the week after that, it ought to be all back to business as usual. But make sure you're following us on all the things. You can check out our Twitter is there below Yoda Bauer. We're at Port Haven Forums on Twitter. You can find us at port-haven.com. I will say too, we had some hosting migration problems earlier this week. So if you were unable to load our main blog site for a while, all of that should be fixed now.
Thanks largely to Professor Django.
And you can find links to our forums on there, or go to forums.port-haven.com. We're on Facebook. If you haven't already, that subscribe button is right below us. You can just go ahead and hit that subscribe button and get notified if you hit the bell every time we go live, especially on days like this where we do it at different days and times occasionally. You can get that notification. But I think that's mostly going to do it for
For
us.
today. Yeah,
Um, yeah, I've never played Empire at War, but
I
we've been
have.
talking
I
about
love it.
Empire at War
Yeah,
also.
I have Empire at War on my old laptop, so as much as I get a lot of crap for it, I operate off of a Mac computer. Um, and Empire at War is out for Apple, but it is not on Steam for Apple, which is weird. So I'm going to try to pull it off of my old laptop, and if I can, I might also play some of that because we were talking about having a couple of like non-story based games if we ever need to do like a one-off
Right.
stream.
And
So
I've
I'll
never
see if I
played
can get
Empire
that
at War,
working.
but I do have Galactic Battlegrounds, so you might get
Yeah,
some really old Star Wars real time strategy stuff too, here and there. But
yeah, but I want to say we got at least one new sub, which is the Obi-Wan in the chat, who's also dropping a lot of really helpful facts about Sith artifacts, which is super cool. I like seeing lots of Star Wars discussion in the in the chat. I also like Fat Batman, who's apparently into you doing some Funko videos.
yeah, I've got a Funko problem too. Luckily, my Funko problem is mostly limited by ones I find on sale.
Yeah.
So, um, but I also just to throw this out there too. I know Jess talked about this on her stream the other day, but we started streaming some of our gaming content as a sort of bonus celebration for hitting 250 subscribers,
Yep.
and we're
And
well over 300 now.
yep, which is
So
super amazing.
so thank you all for being along on the ride for
Yep.
all of this, and we hope that you have as much fun with this stuff as we do.
And a real quick shout out, if you are in our chat and you do stuff, go ahead and say hello. I saw Absurdum drop by. He has a YouTube channel. McYagi was in here earlier. Who else was around who's also the negotiator? Like I said earlier, Voltix does some streaming. A lot of our friends are content creators. So if you want to do a quick shout out at the end of the stream, I'm always fine with people saying what they do towards the end, just so it doesn't clog up discussion.
Yeah.
But it's great talking to you all, and we will see you again soon.
Yep. See ya.